At first glance, Whispering Pines looked like a postcard town, with tree-lined streets and Victorian houses, evoking that comforting feeling where everyone knows each other by name and smiles are freely given. But as with many small towns, those that appear picture-perfect often hide secrets behind their masks. And on that crisp November morning, its biggest secret was about to come to light. Emily Davis, a young wife, renowned for her beauty and charismatic presence, was about to discover that her perfect life was an illusion. What seemed to be an ideal marriage and close friendships would soon be revealed as a web of lies, betrayals, and dangerous obsessions. News that something dark was happening at the Davis house spread quickly through the town, leaving residents in shock. To many, Emily was more than just a neighbor. She was a close friend, always ready to help and offer a smile in difficult times. The Turners were the Davises' closest friends. Michael, an architect of some repute with an outgoing personality that captivated everyone, seemed strangely troubled. Sarah, a dedicated and caring teacher, could barely maintain her composure. As events unfolded, Whispering Pines' immaculate facade began to crumble, and deeply buried secrets started to emerge. What appeared to be a tranquil life soon revealed itself as part of a tangle of dangerous relationships and intense emotions. Michael Turner, with his magnetic presence and successful career as an architect, was a man noticed in the community. Married to Sarah, the popular third-grade teacher, he seemed to have a perfect marriage. They lived in an elegant house on Maple Street, with a garden carefully maintained by Sarah. John and Emily Davis were newcomers to town, having moved to Whispering Pines 5 years earlier. John was an outgoing financial consultant, very good at his business, and quickly built his circle of friends. His wife Emily was also beautiful and turned heads with an outgoing personality that quickly made her the life of any party or social event. These two families did everything together. Dinners, parties, trips. But behind this appearance of perfect friendship and successful lives, a dark secret was about to be revealed, threatening to destroy not only their relationships but also the peace of the entire town of Whispering Pines. But there was a more private side to this friendship. A year after the meeting, on a wine-fueled evening at the Turner's house, an unexpected topic burst forth. Open relationships. Conversation bemoaned in jest eventually took the two families into very unfamiliar grounds with regard to their own relationships. By mutual agreement, they began swapping spouses, opening a new level of excitement and freshness in their lives. First, it seemed to be like a shot in the arm for their marriages. Michael with Emily, John with Sarah, all of them seemed to like the change. But beneath the veneer of continuing smiles and cloistered meetings, complex and dangerous feelings started taking root. Michael showed an increasingly strange interest in her. His obsession was hardly concealed. Sarah is a person who misses very little, especially about her husband, so she started to notice a change. 2 long glances, a lingering touch, more than necessary attention towards Emily. Meanwhile, sensitive to others' feelings, Emily felt the weight of Michael's attention. What had started out as a very exciting adventure was slowly growing into something much darker and dangerous. Determined to keep things peaceful and the family's friendship intact, she called the arrangement to an end, not having a clue how all this was going to be turned into a big disaster. With tension mounting and the bonds of friendship nearing a breaking point, Whispering Pines was ready to become the setting for an obsessive tale of betrayal, would shake it to its core. Just another turn in this investigation would show even more disturbing secrets as residents of this town wrestled against shadows now threatening to consume their supposedly idyllic lives. There was clearly something palpably tense between these two families, as evidenced by the fact that Emily made the decision to end the open relationship. To Michael, who had developed an obsession with her that was growing day by day, this was a crushing blow. Passionately exciting adventure had almost transformed into scorching obsession within a very short time. Now unwilling to accept the bitter pill of rejection, Michael quietened into secretly stalking Emily and tracing her steps to scrutinize her habits, both with escalating disturbing intensity. By the end of this arrangement, John was relieved that his marital life could get back on track. Little did he know the internal darkness his wife was going through, or the increase in darkness Michael was harboring. But Sarah wasn't relieved at all. Her suspicions about Michael and Emily's relationship continued to keep her on her toes. She began to search every corner for some sign to prove her suspicions. In that small town of Whispering Pines, word traveled fast. Apparently, solid friendships were bound to start showing cracks. Whispers at parties and furtive glances at supermarkets became commonplace. Now, a dedicated teacher with a sharp instinct, Sarah started digging for the truth. She found small clues, messages on Michael's phone, subtle changes in his routine, the strange gleam in his eyes when he spoke of Emily. On the other hand, Emily was torn as well. She could not pretend not to notice that she still felt an attraction toward Michael, but she wanted to save her marriage and the friendship between their families. Michael, however, did not know when to stop, continued not to let her alone. She was getting worried and scared. As a final attempt to end things, Emily approached Michael and told him to back off for good. Michael responded in an unexpected way. He promised to behave as asked, but in his eyes lurked a heaviness that forebode otherwise. The next few weeks proved to be a cat-and-mouse chase as Michael tried to prove that they were meant to be. He started sending anonymous flowers, writing notes in unlikely places, and going on silent calls. Tormented and panicked, Emily started doubting her sanity. Her husband John did notice the change in his wife, but couldn't get any information from her, fearing what might happen if the stalker did find out. She continued investigating. One night, while Michael was sound asleep, she got his laptop to see if there was anything that would prove her suspicions. What she saw was more disgusting than what she had actually pictured. Photos of Emily, obsessive messages that were not sent out, and a digital diary detailing fantasies and plans. Shock gave way to cold resolve. Sarah knew she had to protect Emily and expose Michael. But how? At this point, a showdown was inevitable. It was just the beginning of a plot spilling out with unpredictable consequences, as Sarah came up with her revelations and Emily's growing paranoia. As tensions rose and masks fell, Whispering Pines was about to witness a series of events that would change their lives forever. In a poor attempt to patch things up and save face, Emily and John invited Michael and Sarah over for dinner. The evening was thought out, with the table set and the menu exquisite. Emily was nervous, but wanted to make sure that her ending the relationship arrangement was clear and definite to Michael. She hoped that John, by her side and Sarah there, closed the nightmare. Michael arrived with a sweet smile on his face, and yet Sarah could feel the tension in her husband's eyes. She knew pressure cooker building up inside him, and he was about to burst. Dinner was very calm at the beginning, with superficial conversations and laughter. It was not natural, but by evening the atmosphere began to thicken. The furtive looks that Michael cast at Emily were becoming increasingly intense and disturbing. All this went unnoticed, but not to the observant eyes of Sarah. John, not realizing how obsessive Michael had become, tried to keep the topics of conversation light. His wife remained aloof, locked inside her mind with dark thoughts. At one point, Michael got up and went into the bathroom. When he did, Sarah seized the opportunity to follow him discreetly into the hall, where she confronted him with an angry whisper. "I know what you're doing, Michael. It has to stop, now." Michael, feeling confronted, tried to defend himself as he could tell she was furious. She said that if he didn't keep away from Emily, she would reveal everything. Angered and frustrated, Michael held her to the wall with gleaming eyes that sent flashes of madness and desperation. "You don't understand," he whispered fervently. "Emily and I belong together." The sound of footsteps broke the argument. There stood Emily in the hallway, her eyes wide on Michael and Sarah standing there, embroiled in a heated argument. She tried to intervene, but the tension was unbearable. Michael felt things were getting out of hand, and so he let go of Sarah, trying to calm himself down and act like nothing happened. Returning to his seat at the table, the atmosphere of dinner was, however, ruined. Sarah returned to the table with an expression of steel and a substituted smile. Emily stood there in a shock, trying to act cool. John did not realize the drama and continued jabbering on about inconsequential topics. He really was oblivious to the storm of emotions whirring around him. It wasn't until after dinner, when Michael and Sarah had finally left, that Emily broke down. She told John all about Michael's stalking, the notes, the calls, constant fear living in her head. John was furious and concerned, promising to protect his wife at all costs from this stalker. But how could they protect themselves from someone who would stop at nothing, get what he wanted? Sarah, in the car, was silent while a storm of dark thoughts crept her mind. She knew Michael had lost control and that she needed drastic measures to save not only Emily but herself as well. What she didn't know was how far Michael was ready to go. By then, the tension between the families was unbearable. And in this small town of Whispering Pines, the dinner that was supposed to bring peace only deepened the chasm between them. And very nearly, the shadows of the past were going to turn perilously real as a stage for a series of events no one would think of. For days after, Michael lived in a sort of fevered fugue state. His thoughts remained with Emily. Without her, each minute seemed agony. He felt he had to do something to break the distance she was forcing between them. It was as if her decision to call it quits had left an open wound that he couldn't help but look at over and over again. He started paying more attention to Emily's movements, her body language, and every other detail about her routine. For him, every little movement, every word, or even the lack of it, fueled his belief that they were meant for each other. And he became convinced that if he could get a moment alone with her, he could convince her otherwise. That night, the town of Whispering Pines was shrouded in thick darkness, its horizon barely dotted by the flicker of only some streetlight. Michael parked his car on one of the side streets a couple of blocks away from Emily's and John's house. He was dressed in dark clothes, trying to blend with the night. His heart was racing. His resolve remained unabated. He patiently waited as the lights in Emily's house went off one by one. Finally, everything was quiet, so he crept toward the house with silent footsteps. Predator. He had known that John was working the night shift and would leave behind the girl he was supposed to protect. Perfect. With shaking hands, Michael levered open the rear window with a screwdriver. In his mind, the sound made by the opening latch seemed as loud as thunder. Yet he pushed forward. Moving in through the house, he drifted to the left and on down to Emily's bedroom with the grace of a man who had actually rehearsed this scene countless times in his mind. With a racing heart at what was soon to come, he moved into Emily's bedroom. Emily was asleep, completely oblivious to the danger that lurked an arm's length away from her. Michael stared at her a second, drinking in how beautiful she was as she slept peacefully. He walked over to the bed, placing a hand lightly upon her shoulder, and Emily jerked awake. Her eyes were wide with fear as they rested upon Michael. "Michael, what are you doing here?" he whispered, voice shaking. "I need to talk to you, Emily," he said in a low, urgent voice. "You don't understand. We belong together. I can't live without you." Emily tried to get up, but Michael took her by the shoulders. Surprising strength, she was pinned. "Please, Michael, you need to leave," she pleaded, but he was beyond reason. "No, Emily, I'm not going anywhere. Not until you listen to me," he said, holding her in the breadth of his eyes. "I did this for us. I did this because I love you." The front door burst open again, slamming shut behind him. John had returned for something crucial that he had forgotten. His eyes widened in shock as he saw Michael and Emily in that incriminating pose. "Michael, what in God's name are you doing?" he bellowed, striding toward the interloper. Michael turned around, panic washing over his features. He knew by now time was running out, but before he could react at all, John came forth with a strong punch to his face, sending him to the floor. Emily ran to the phone, calling the police as John held Michael down. The tension in the room was so thick one could cut it with a knife. Michael, now desperate, yelled at Emily. His voice was like a vortex of despair. "You need to understand, Emily. We're meant for each other." But then Emily turned her back on him, tears in her eyes, and gave him a lamenting gaze. "No, Michael. It's over." With the sirens drawing near, Michael knew his obsession had laid everything to ruin. Darkness descended on this night, much like what was already in his soul. At this point, there wasn't any turning back. The madness ended abruptly as the police arrived. Repercussions from it had yet to unfold. The night in Whispering Pines had barely settled when another storm was brewing, promising to reveal even darker secret. Michael's arrest sent the small town of Whispering Pines into a tailspin of rumors and speculations. Everyone had known Michael as a good neighbor and a hardworking employee at one of the local hospitals. No one ever suspected that he had such a dangerous obsession with Emily. However, secrets began to unravel as the police dug deeper into the case, which no one could have ever predicted. The efforts that Emily and John made to get back to normalcy, their lives now carried an umbrella of the incident forever. John, who had been protective, was on overdrive. He got the security system at their house upgraded and did not let Emily go out alone. It was Emily herself who seemed different, more withdrawn, as if something deeper gnawed at her. One night, rummaging through some old boxes left in the basement for distraction, Emily stumbled upon an old, dusty envelope with her name on it, inscribed in ink. Opening the envelope, she discovered a letter many years old, addressed to her from someone named Linda, whose name did sound vaguely familiar. In that letter, Linda revealed secrets that Emily could never have imagined. She confessed in the letter to being her real mom, telling how she was forced to give her up for adoption due to tragic circumstances. She begs for forgiveness and hopes for a day when she can reunite with Emily again. It shook Emily to her core as emotions she never knew surfaced. Who was this woman, and why hadn't her adoptive parents ever mentioned anything? Feeling interested and unsettled, she decided to investigate further. She went to the police station, where Detective Ryan Mitchell, investigating Michael's case, offered to help her. A seasoned detective in mystery cases with a sharp intuition, he soon felt like there was more to this story. It wasn't until Ryan and Emily started digging into her past that they found out Linda had died under mysterious circumstances a few years after she had written the letter. Though the case of her death was closed due to a lack of evidence, Detective Ryan wanted to uncover the hidden truth. On the other hand, Don was not at all pleased with the investigation. According to him, Emily should forget about the past and move on with her life. However, he was insistent to such a degree on burying the past that his insistence raised suspicion in Emily's mind. Was he trying to conceal something? And if yes, what could be the reason? The more Emily learned about her real heritage, the more she began tracing very weird behavior on John's part. Late-night phone calls, clandestine meetings, and evasive answers began to erode the trust she had in him. One night while following him, Emily saw John slip into a Fleabag motel on the edge of town. Confused and flustered, Emily approached the room John was in. She pressed her ear against the door and could barely hear any conversation. John was talking to someone. The words couldn't be distinguished, but a cold shiver down her spine told her that there was something seriously wrong. Bent on getting to the bottom of things, Emily decided to confront John. Before she could do so, however, a series of unexpected and dangerous events began to unfold that would eventually threaten not only her marriage but also her very own life. It was especially crushing for Emily when she saw John driving into a Fleabag motel. What seemed to be just the dangerous fixation of Michael had turned on her by becoming part of a deeper and more sinister plot. Her husband. Unable to confront him directly, Emily thought of a different way. She would investigate on her own and gather the evidence before finally deciding to confront John. It wasn't until Detective Ryan Mitchell joined the case that Emily really began to look backward into John's past. They discovered that John had moved to Whispering Pines from several cities, and in all those places, women in troubled relationships and mysterious disappearances formed a pattern. Particularly, one of his ex-girlfriends had vanished many years ago, and her case remained unsolved by the police. Furthermore, Emily and Ryan found out that John had a secret bank account to which huge sums of money were deposited periodically. This money was received from some vague source. On further investigation, it came to light that John had been running a questionable real estate investment business, in which properties changed hands at very short intervals, thus pointing to money laundering. It is at the same time that Emily started feeling that John was becoming evasive and irritable when she probed him about his past. This became very tense, and the atmosphere at home was unbearable. She felt as if she was living with a stranger, and fear that John might turn his discovery on her any time made her remain on high alert. One night, while John was asleep, Emily took his phone and started scrolling through all of his messages and emails. The messages included encrypted conversations between him and someone who went only by K. The messages mentioned money transfers and secret meetups, but one nailed her attention particularly. K referred to a meeting at an abandoned warehouse on the town outskirts, where they would talk about the next step. Determined, Emily resolved to shadow John that night to the warehouse, just before the meeting. From the shadows, she watched as John met with a tall, hooded man. The conversation was very tense, and Emily could pick up bits of what they were saying, getting rid of problems, and keeping everything quiet. Her heart began to race with the realization that John was dealing with something far worse than she had presumed. She saw the hooded man turn to leave in the weak moonlight, and then she saw his face. He was someone she had never thought to see again. Michael, the obsessed neighbor who was supposed to be behind prison bars. How is he free? And what is he doing there, conspiring with John? With her mind resembling a whirlpool of questions and fears, she felt that she was entrapped in so many tangled lies and betrayals than she had ever perceived. She had mistakenly knocked over some rusty can, which created a clinging sound that reverberated across the warehouse. The two men turned, their faces hardening in suspicion and anger. With the thought that death was knocking at her door, Emily remained still, her senses at its peak. She was paralyzed as John and Michael approached. Their hearts were racing with the incense of the moment, and only a few meters away before adrenaline finally gave her a push. Emily came out from her hiding, trying to stay calm. "Emily?" John asked, his voice a mix of surprise and anger. "John, what's going on here? Who is he?" Emily challenged, her malice-filled eyes landing on Michael. He stepped forward into the faint light, his pale face and cold eyes illuminated. "I'm the last person you expected to see, aren't I, Emily?" John tried to intervene. "This isn't your business, Emily. Go home." "Not until I know the truth," she shot back, now resolute. "I know about the money and all your real estate deals and the people who have vanished. And now Michael? He belongs in prison." John turned to Michael, who shrugged. "She knows too much, John. We need to deal with this now." Before Emily could turn to run, John grasped her arm. "Emily, you have to believe me. It's not what it looks like." "Trust you?" she shrieked, jerking her arm from his grasp. "You've been lying to me all along." The tension in the warehouse was high. Suddenly, the warehouse's metal door burst open with a loud clang as police raided the building, weapons drawn. "Police! Hands up!" John and Michael stood still, raising their hands slowly. The next one to enter was Detective Ryan Mitchell, who was working with Emily. "Emily, are you all right?" Feeling relieved, Emily ran to Ryan. "How did you find us?" "I followed you. I knew something wasn't right, and your clues led us here," Ryan replied, his eyes not diverting from the suspect. The detectives came, handcuffed John and Michael, and then led them out of the warehouse. It was at the police station that the revelations began to unravel. Obsessed with Emily, Michael goaded John into money laundering schemes and financial crimes. With his past used as a weapon, Michael blackmailed John. If he didn't cooperate with him, Michael would expose his dark secrets. Ensnared in Michael's web of lies and blackmail, John attempted to protect Emily, but in so doing, only ensnared himself in his own mistakes. His relationship with Michael, as well as the criminal activities that ensued, became unsustainable and resulted in a tragedy that destroyed nearly everything. It was with the collected testimonies and evidence that the police could piece together the puzzle. John and Michael were convicted for their crimes, which ranged from attempted murder, conspiracy. Justice was finally served, but at a great cost to Emily's life. The woman was devastated by her husband's infidelity, yet somehow she found the strength to move on. Still supported by Ryan and the community, Emily began putting her life together again, with the idea of forgetting. This experience taught her about the easiness of breaking trust and the need to pay attention to one's intuition. Though Whispering Pines slowly returned to normal, she knew the scars would remain. She did, however, know that she was tough and strong enough to face whatever lay ahead of her. The town whispered secrets, but she learned how to listen above all else to her own voice. And thus, in the dying light of a mystique city, so Emily walked into an uncertain future, but with revived hope that no matter how dark it gets, Light does find its way.